podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. So a fun weekend with both of us eventually ending up pressing buttons made me think maybe, just maybe, things might be back on track after a bit of a tumultuous start. But there is a new order for us to contend with as a result, with many clean sheets, busting coupons everywhere as FPL returned after an interlull. An interlull which, this time next year, will apparently be 3 weeks long. Oof, dear me. Anyway, back with me always is Sam, aka FPL Pricey. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well, thanks. I thought it was an enjoyable return to the Premier League in game week 4 after a little break. And yeah, it was nice to see a few clean sheets go our way for once. And the free hit in both of our cases seems to do fairly well. So I'm starting to get in the groove again, starting to feel like FPL is not all pretty disappointing weekends. It can be happy sometimes. So hopefully a shade of optimism will be placed into this pod and we can move forward with a good feeling about things. In the meantime, though, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we will reflect on game week 4, how we did and why we eventually pressed certain specific buttons. And we'll also be analysing and assessing whether or not a new meta in FPL is forming. Have FPL's tectonic plates moved and shifted for good? Or are these changes perhaps slightly unsustainable as of yet? Form versus fixtures will make a return once again. 1 week punt and best captains as always. And finally, reflecting on our teams as we go into game week 5. It is Tuesday, the 16th of September. The Champions League is going on in the background. Arsenal have already played. I think Gyökeres got a nasty cut from his own teammate Gabriel in the back of the head, but carried on anyway. So I don't think there's too much to worry about there. And Spurs are playing in the background as we're recording as well. So if anything major goes on there, we'll try and catch it and just flag it for the pod, so it doesn't date the pod too badly. In the meantime, though, I think we're all good and we're all clear to talk about our scores, aren't we, Tom?
Yeah, let's do it. So, as I mentioned, pretty much back on track for me. I was not a happy bunny on Saturday, it's fair to say, was I? So I think, but basically, like, it just shows you shouldn't get carried away by your Saturday score. But I just had blank after blank in midfield. Madueke, who I did squeeze in the end. Harvey Barnes, who I squeezed in at the last minute. Neither of them, especially Madueke, doing anything. And all three of the front line, everyone else in the front line doing something was really annoying. Madueke in particular, so annoying. Like all data showed him top in the charts. A fantastic display of all fart no poo, which made me worried that I would again sort of fall short. But yeah, 75 for me. Also ended up sticking with the Salah and Haaland draft, and additionally ended up, as I mentioned, putting Barnes in, which meant I took out João Pedro to fund the 4-5-1. And yeah, I mean, I think the leaks definitely helped with that, just kind of solidify the final sort of few pieces. It wasn't too far off, I don't think, Sam, what I presented the other day, but going to the 4-5-1 was a little bit kind of I've been quite surprised there. And yeah, but I guess kind of going with Haaland, which many didn't do on free hit, his performance sort of somewhat justified his inclusion. And I got defensive full house as well, which was very nice. But as I mentioned, the midfield other than Salah, who I captained kind of by default, I think I was too busy messing around with the edge pieces, Sam, to consider properly captaining someone else. Probably some outcome bias there too, in terms of Haaland. The midfield absolutely bombed. And yeah, it just, I don't know. It was the only thing that took the sheen off a tiny bit. But hey, you know what? 75 points. I looked at my team. If I'd have left it, it'd have got 59, so 16-point gain. Assuming I made no transfers, is absolutely fine on free hit. I'm going to call it like an average success, to be fair. And I think just it was one midfield performer away other than Salah from being spectacular, and plus Semenyo and João Pedro, both doing points dampen the green, but up to the lofty ranks of 3.6 million, it says here. So pop those champagne corks, people. It's going very, very well indeed. How are you doing, Sam? A little bit better, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with my start to the season so far. Pre-hit was a relative success, I'd say. 77 points for me. Big green arrow, almost half my rank again. So last two have been successful game weeks for me. In my back line, I went with 3 at the back in the end. That was mainly because after I heard Voltemada was due to start, thanks to the leak. And logic, I suppose, with Wissa being out for a little while, I really wanted to try and squeeze him in and add that spot into my forward line. So I went a little bit weaker at the back. I was pretty determined to go with a 4-4-2, but in the end, I buckled. I wish I did, but again, I'm not complaining because a player I brought in, Voltemada, got 9 points and looked really good as well. Great header on debut. Very impressed with him. My backline all scored or all got a clean sheet. I was about to say all scored 6, but Munoz got the yellow card, so 5 for him. Lacroix, I feel a little bit hard done by because he was on maximum bonus until like the last minute when Sunderland were doing a lot of heavy defending in the last flashes of the game. I think Roof's got a save that took him above him, and then basically he just contrived to find a way of getting no bonus from that. But all my backline did very well. I kept Semenyo. I was pretty determined to do so. I thought that was a really good matchup for him, and got a surprise penalty as well, which was fortunate. I wouldn't expect him to keep them moving forward with Kluivert coming back into the side, but it's nice that we know that he's at least second in line for penalties, and Kluivert isn't a shoe-in to come straight back in anyway, so who knows. Salah got the last minute goal for a penalty. That is 4 returns out of 4 for my captain, all in the post or the last flashes of the game in the post 90 minutes. So very happy with that. Two penalty goals in the last few minutes for my captain in the last 2 weeks as well. So I feel a bit fortunate there. My triple Liverpool midfield was not a success. It's a little bit of an unfortunate one for Wirtz and Gakpo, but my forward line made up for it. Voltemada 9 points, and Gyökeres was unlucky not to get a second return. And again, in previous seasons, probably would have come away with maximum bonus points, even with just 1 goal. But with the bonus points changes, only got 6 points for him. Overall, it was a story of surviving or proving that you can survive in a week where Haaland gets a brace and João Pedro also does the business. 77 points, and it was looking pretty phenomenal on Saturday evening. And I was really trying not to get carried away because I knew what was coming the next day. But I was up at about 200, 300k come Saturday evening. So do not go checking midweek ranks yet, because it does fill you full of hope. And then Haaland and João Pedro, obviously, João Pedro in the evening of Saturday brought me back down to earth. Haaland did the business the next day. So yeah, back down to 1.4 million. But overall, I'm very happy with the start, or happy enough with the start, and can hopefully kick on in the next few game weeks.
Yeah, 20 points ahead of me now, I think you are. So yeah, managed it very well.
That's a captain return though, isn't it? That's nothing.
It's Bruno Fernandes versus Cunha going off injured in the 30th minute. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter at all. Right. Okay. On to this week's sort of main topic. It's the new meta. So sure, we've all noticed that things have shifted, and we thought maybe it was worth just quickly discussing obvious caveats, small sample sizes, etc. But a few aspects of this which may be driving opinion. So maybe the handover from Salah to Haaland, maybe kind of changing of the guard in terms of the teams we care about. Villa and Forest, 2 heavily fancied teams pre-season in decline. I have seen that Aston Villa have actually done a goal, Sam.
They've
scored one. And finally, it's big at the back. I mean, it did come touch on this a couple of weeks ago. It's big at the back, sustainable now, fueled by those DefCons. But first off, I mean, should we have all started with Haaland, Sam? And is Salah finally starting to fade?
Well, I think it's important not to get too hindsighty 4 game weeks in with Haaland. We all knew he was a good pick. We know he's a phenomenal striker. It was just all centered around whether or not he'd be good enough value for money, and trying to squeeze him in alongside Salah for a lot of people. Just it felt like there were too many sacrifices to be made at the beginning of the season. Now, cast your mind back to this time last year. I think we were all having a very similar discussion with both Salah and Haaland doing very well, but a lot of people went without at least one of them at the start of the year. Haaland got off to a fantastic start, under worse data than he's got this year as well, it must be noted. But fantastic start, then faded. So I think it is important to maybe just take a step back and realize that not too much has really changed about what we think Erling Haaland is as a player. We know he's phenomenal. We know he's about a goal a game as a striker. He's slightly above a goal a game at the moment, and his XG is slightly above a goal a game, or actually quite significantly above a goal a game at the moment. So are we expecting that to continue at that rate, or are we expecting it to kind of come back down to what his regular normal rate is, which is sort of inhuman for most people? It's impossible for most, but he goes at about a goal a game on average. Do we think that this is sustainable? I think it's within the realms of possibility. But if we cast our mind back to the start of the season, I think the reason that a lot of people went without him wasn't because we didn't think he'd score a goal a game or even potentially outdo that. It was because we thought Salah would be as good as he was last year or similar to, and therefore with his extra routes to points and the fact that he's got that extra point for the goal, he's got the clean sheet as well, it just made more sense as a pick, especially because he seemed like a better captaincy candidate in more of the opening 5 game weeks. However, the situation does change very quickly. He looks fairly peripheral, and I think a lot of our thinking around Haaland is maybe put more in focus, or Haaland is more in focus because Salah has gotten off to, I mean, he's got returns, but he hasn't looked very good. So no. I think that's why we've got such a keen eye on Haaland, and this is a real debate. If Salah had also matched Haaland in the first few game weeks, I think we'd all be shrugging a little bit and saying, well, yeah, we know Haaland does this. He always does this. I don't think he's done anything especially crazy that we weren't expecting. It's just Salah has tailed off a little bit versus what we expected him to, and that is maybe putting this under the microscope more than ever before.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Haaland, as you kind of rightly said, has always been there or thereabouts with respect to involvement, a second in 23-24, third in 24-25, and now top in 25-26 by quite a long way, it must be said. I mean, if you look at the non-pen XG, it's kind of, 5.7 in 4 games, which is, was that 1.
It's above like 50% of Premier League clubs at the moment.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? And that's like more than double second, who's Ismail Assar. And he's actually underperforming by 1 goal this year. So it's just ridiculous. But you mentioned it's Mo Salah as kind of the one factor for why lots of people, I know that people did start with Haaland and are probably having a good time with it. But I'd also add that a bit of Fugazi really came from the overhaul with City as well, with KDB leaving. Foden had been anonymous for a whole year. And a raft of these unknown quantities like Cherky and Reinders joined, and it was hard to envision sort of starting the season without Mo, given the kind of expected effective ownership, albeit it's actually been around sort of 100% most weeks, given the week template we've been enjoying. And Haaland and Mo, that kind of draft together wasn't seen as kind of as balanced as it could have been. And as you mentioned, that kind of prevailing anonymity for Mo has really kind of built a bit of a sea change, hasn't it? And that Burnley fixture coming in 6, I think, is going to lend itself to many thinking, oh, that's a good time to triple captain, especially with no Champions League around it. Which makes me think, a changing of the guard is coming. One thing, Sam, I did notice this weekend, I heard it, and I couldn't get it out of my head the moment I heard it, because I thought it was a really good point. I forget who said it. If it was an FPL podcast, do forgive me, but I don't think it was. But Salah has played in front of 5 different fullbacks this season already, after years of just kind of having Trent. So he's played in front of Frimpong, Gomez, Bradley, Szoboszlai, and Endo. All of them have played there this year. And I don't know whether that's kind of the core catalyst for his performances, but maybe that's something to bear in mind, that this Liverpool team is a team in transition, as evidenced through the late goals. This is the first team, I think, ever to win 4 games after scoring after the 80th minute or something like that. And pick your poison, whether that's the fact that Liverpool can't keep getting away with it, or whether, hey, this is Liverpool when they're really bad. Imagine what they're going to be like when the likes of Wirtz, the likes of Frimpong, etc., all bed in. 2 goals and 1 assist in 4 games is still a decent enough baseline. It's just that you can't help but cast covetous glances, can you, Sam, at the big Norwegian?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that because Salah is so popular, because he's 14.5 million, but all of the focus is on whether or not he's getting returns and whether or not he's looking good. I don't think this is a Salah problem. I think it's a Liverpool problem. They just don't quite look like the team that they were last season in terms of building up from the back, creating the XG that we're used to. They're mid-table for XG at the moment. It's not a blockbuster performance from them at the start of the season. Despite that, they've got 4 wins from 4, so they are looking like a team that could go on and win it yet again. And they got off to maybe a little bit of a pedestrian start under Slot last season as well. It took them a little while to get going, but there were still players returning well in their side. I think if you look at Salah, obviously a lot of people owned Verts at the start of the season as well, so he's been under the spotlight a little bit. But even players like Cody Gakpo as well, and he's got a few returns, but a couple of those assists were basically just like passing it across and then someone just hoofing it from outside the box, and it's kind of a hockey assist in a way. It didn't really create anything. So I think there's an argument for all of those Liverpool players to be kind of put in one question together, which is, are Liverpool creating enough at the moment? Are they at their best yet? Are they at the peak of their powers? And I truly don't think it's a specific Salah issue. And it's something that Slot will be focused on and working on in the behind the scenes right now. So I don't know how long this lasts. Obviously, I'm not an expert tactician or anything, but Slot is, and the Liverpool backroom staff will be working on this. And I imagine sooner rather than later, they're going to be a team that are in the top 2, top 3 for XG created per game. So I think it is a matter of time with Salah. If anyone's looking at him and thinking this guy is just not getting the returns that we're used to, he might take a little bit of a dive from last season because he had an absolutely unheard of season last year. But don't expect him to get nothing, because he will tick over with good returns. If he gets under 18, 19, 20 goals this year, that would be a surprise to me. And if he gets under 30 attacking returns in total, that would also be, I would still say, relatively surprising for me. So he might become more like evened out with Haaland in terms of how important they're going to be. But I don't think we're at a point yet, as the picture suggests on screen, that we're passing over the crown to Haaland based on a 4-game sample size in which one player's got 5 returns, the other's got 3. I think there's going to be some balancing out coming back when Liverpool look back to their best, or when they figure things out.
Absolutely. And if you zone out and look at the fixtures, apart from obviously the Burnley game week 6 was a huge carrot for swapping the 2 over. I think it'd be quite difficult unless you wildcarded now, especially if you're looking for the triple captain 6 to get to Salah and Haaland in one team. But following that, I'm not going to read off all the fixtures, but until they play each other in game week 11, it's actually fairly even Stevens in terms of their run, right? So either horse is still backable. And I think it's really interesting that if you look at kind of solvers effectively, they will all tell you to buy Haaland now in game week 6, but after that they'll say, yeah, just go back to back in Salah, because of all the things that Sam said earlier on about rooster points and everything of that nature. So I think both these horses are still in the race, and it's not the case quite yet that we can write off Mo Salah, because when would you ever do such a thing apart from the start of last year when we all thought that Jota RIP could cover him. So yeah, still an open question. I think that one's unsurprisingly. And next one then, Villa and Forest, I think, are the 2 teams I've kind of picked on here, but maybe there are some others we could throw in. 2 heavily fancy teams in pre-season. Certainly, though, are teams who have disappointed, and should we have seen it coming in some ways? First thing, Forest, I think that you pointed out actually on one of the preseason pods, that if you looked at the XGC data after starting last season solidly, it had fallen off a cliff. And maybe we could have done more to look at the likes of Fulham, Everton, and definitely Palace as the stubborn, sort of well-organised sides to major on defensively. And Ange coming in, as you said last week, is likely to sacrifice some solidity for attacking Vim. Like, in the short term, obviously they've got 4th and 3rd from bottom, I think it is, for XG respectively, in Sunderland and Burnley next to. So if you've got Forest defensive assets, assuming if you've got Murillo, he's all right, which it looks like he might be, not entirely sure. I think Ange was kind of guardedly positive today, wasn't he, in those quotes that we both saw. Probably keep. And then if you are looking to wildcard 7, I think is perfectly fine. Just say, you know what, see you later, guys. But yeah, it's been slightly disappointing, hasn't it, to not come away with more.
Yeah, and I think with Forest, the warning signs were there, like you said, and even like from the summer, it looked like there might be some issues in the backroom staff, and if cogs were turning. Basically, it didn't look quite as secure as it did this time last year. However, the fixtures were still good enough, and we've still got two of those fixtures yet to come in 5 and 6. That was a big reason as to why a lot of people went for at least one Forest defender from the off, but some people doubled up. Some people went with Wood as well, and the fixtures. When you're at the start of the season, all you can really base it off of is what you saw from last year in terms of performance, and usually that is measured across a whole season because you're looking at a whole sample. You don't tend to look at like, oh, I'm going to take an 8 game week sample from the end of the year, but it's just worth trying to remember that that's the most relevant data to maybe look at going into the next season. Maybe one for future Sam and Tom to consider when we start up again next year. But Forest had dropped off a cliff a little bit, but the fixtures were good enough that it was like, well, maybe it's just a bit of a factory reset. Maybe they're a bit tired and fatigue comes into it when they're challenging for the Champions League towards the end of the year. Maybe there were other factors going on there, so we can back them again. And the ownership seemed quite high, so it was maybe a bit of a defensive play to have one of them. And the fixtures, like I said, they were there and they still kind of exist for the next two. I think I was always looking at getting rid of my Forest defender in game week 7, and I don't really see any reason the plan should change. Even though I do expect them to be slightly worse in defence under Ange, I don't think it will be so bad in the next two that Burnley and Sunderland obviously touch wood, but they're not going to hopefully score 3 or 4 goals each and prove that Forest are just absolutely washed in defence. It's not going to be that dramatic a drop off, you would hope. But that's if Murillo's even fit, because if he's not, then I've got no horse in this race at all, and I can just look at my Everton defenders instead. But yeah, I think next two you're fine to hold on.
Yeah, indeed. On the other hand, though, Villa ended last season with 3 wins in 4. Obviously, the final day, Martinez got sent off against Man United. They lost 2-0, and that kind of saw them not qualify for Champions League. But ended the season kind of relatively strongly. I think kind of they lost to Crystal Palace, didn't they, in the semi-final of the FA Cup? And it just, I don't know what's happened to them. Second bottom for XG and XGC, the only team that failed to score in the Premier League. Massively stodgy performances. And I wonder if what Tyrone Mings hinted at a couple of weeks ago, Sam, about players not wanting to be there, has soured the mood around the camp. You know, people were kind of reduced PSR. Maybe lots of players kind of thinking, oh, you know, it could be my turn to leave and all this sort of thing. Tielemans now injured, Elliott, who scored tonight, and Sancho bedding in, needing to provide the spark. And I think crucially for FPL teams, Watkins has been a huge disappointment, and Morgan Rogers as well to a lesser extent. We'll talk about Watkins in form versus fixtures as well. But yeah, I mean, another kind of team quite fancied. People had double Villa it was a completely feasible thing game week 1 to go with Rodgers and Watkins. I did see a lot of people do that, but it's just not worked out, has it, for Emery's men?
No, not at all. I think you summarised it perfectly there. It's been stodgy. It's been unimaginative. It looks like they've lost the pace in the wide areas. So yeah, it's been very, very concerning. If anything, I've been more concerned with them than I have with my Forest players, because it just doesn't look like they're creating much. I mean, there was the one game, I think it was game week 3, where Watkins actually generated a fair amount of XG in one match, but either side of that, game week 4, that it was non-existent, and before that as well, game weeks 1 and 2, I think it was pretty poor as well. So over a 4 game week stretch, it's not a massive sample size, but when we're talking about a team's ability to even score one singular goal, that is incredibly worrying. All I would say, yet again, though, and it's going to sound like a broken record, we kind of had them for the fixtures, and the fixtures still haven't run out yet. So we've got Sunderland, Fulham, which is tough, I admit, and then Burnley after that in game week 7. 2 out of the next 3 are the same fixtures that we've just spoken about with Forest. And I mean, at the moment, I have lost pretty much all hope that they are capable of scoring several goals in either of those games. But the reason that we had them at the start of the season was, for a pretty long stretch, it felt like none of those players are going to be required transfers out, and you had nothing really to base a drop off on, other than there's maybe a little bit of an unsettled squad over the summer. You mentioned players that don't want to be there. I'd also flip the script on that and say there are players who had to go, who didn't really want to leave and were loved in the changing room. So Ramsey being a great example, where players playing for Villa came out on Instagram and said, do not abuse this guy. He didn't want to go. We loved him. He's a model professional, and really were strongly hinting at the fact that PSR has really made things quite awkward for them. And you can tell as well, because Villa have been competing with the likes of, well, all of the big boys, Newcastle probably most specifically in that sort of area of the table over the last few years. And it looks like they've been hamstringed by PSR. Obviously, I'm not like into football to the level that I know all the ins and outs of how PSR works over the last 5 years for Villa specifically, but they've clearly made decisions and wages have been given out to players that makes PSR a problem for them at this point. But it still has really impacted them this year, specifically with signing players, with letting players go. And I do just wonder if a few players are looking around, maybe Emery himself as well, and thinking, well, the odds are kind of against us at the moment. Maybe this is where people start getting off the train and thinking maybe there are better opportunities elsewhere, because we've kind of taken this as far as we can before PSR gets in the way and just makes it quite difficult to invest in the squad and take us to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely one of those things that, as you said, maybe it's something that we need to look a bit closer at start of next year. And as well as that, just bear in mind that these things can happen. We'll talk more about Watkins in form versus fixture, and probably try to kind of lump in Rodgers if anyone's kind of keeping the flame for him too in a minute. Final thing is big at the back, sustainable now, fueled by those DefCons. So last year, as I said last week, Sam, we just didn't want any defenders, did we? The changes to the bonus system, penalising them for any concession, alongside the tracking upwards of goals scored in the Premier League, meant the defence was so low scoring. I remember us giving Defender of the Year to Guardiola as a default, but his total was like, what, 150 or so points? Like,
yeah, 153, I think. Yeah,
okay.
He was the only player above 150 last year.
Oh man, given the likes of Trent Robertson, Alonso, Cahill, and co tearing up in the past, it felt like a total annihilation of defenders. But it's been a proper sort of remontada with the introduction of the DefCons. It's been a great addition to the game, I think, rewarding kind of defenders and midfielders, of course, things other than the basic diet of clean sheets, goals, and assists, but not too much to make the game balanced. I think it's kind of just the right level. And it's meant we've looked at the centre backs, right, that we used to only really look at towards the end of the season when clean sheets were becoming more predictable, when players like your man James Tarkowski, Lacroix, bona fide fancy picks now. And you can pretty much play them in any game. And if you buy them, it's an action which, barring injury, limits further actions, which is what we like in FPL, because we've got less decisions to make. And their floor is high, 3 points rather than 2, and their ceiling's in the teens. So I see Dan Ballard in game week 1. But yeah, I think 4 at the back, or having the ability to play 4 at the back via 4.5 base price heroes like Senesi, Anderson, Richards at Palace, maybe even ultra cheap edge pieces like Alderete at Sunderland, and also your classic underpriced due to circumstances pick Tozin at Chelsea. They're all good things to look into now for sort of rotation purposes. But I mean, what do you make of it, Sam? Is it sustainable, or is it just kind of what we've seen so far? Is it 10 clean sheets this game week? I mean, that's kind of a high that we haven't seen for a long time, is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of a two-part question. Like, are the clean sheets sustainable to this level? I would say maybe we can expect a few more clean sheets than we have done in recent seasons, but they're not sustainable to this level specifically. They will probably drop off a little bit. That doesn't mean they can't increase versus previous seasons, though. And maybe there is a bit more of a focus on building up from a solid base for Premier League managers now. So, these trends come and go, and it does seem like we're due a season or two where managers do try and solidify at the back. I think we've had a few promoted clubs now, Southampton being one of them, unfortunately, who come up, try to play expansive football, then get found out. And I think teams like Leeds, Burnley and Sunderland all this season have looked at that and said, well, you know what? We're going to be a bit more pragmatic about it. We're not going to concede 5 XG a game, and we're going to try and keep it a little bit tighter. And that will, again, it's all marginal things, but that will also help to bolster clean sheets across the season just that little bit. And there are less teams to target, I suppose, which might be a sort of fourth meta point that isn't worth discussion yet, but it is more balanced and it's more level this year, it seems, with Sunderland, Burnley and Leeds. So I think clean sheets are probably on the rise, but not as much as we've seen so far this season. They'll probably come back down a smidge, but I really believe in DefCon. I'm completely converted on that. It is making a massive change to the game, and I think it's an opportunity that a lot of FPL managers that aren't listening to pods like this or absorbing content regularly, they're missing out on these. And I've just got the live percentages up, so I'll scroll through right now and just maybe display a few ownership percentages. So Senesi, who again we all agree 4 DefCons out of 4, that's 8 extra points from the first 4 game weeks. That's 2 extra clean sheets for him on top of some clean sheets, attacking returns, all of that already. He's at 9% ownership and at 4.6 million. Keep scrolling down. You've got Chalobah at 8.5%. You've got Tarkowski, who's been again 4 out of 4, 7% ownership. You've got Romero, who's been again fantastic, 6.1. You've got Dan Burn, who's got a 50% hit rate at 5.6. All of these players, Lacroix at 3.9%, and Rodon at 3.2 as well, Anderson at 3.2%. So many defenders who previously just non-options, and a lot of FPL managers are just not going to be looking at them just yet. It will take a while for people to catch up with this, because I think most people think it's really boring and it's a bit of a it's just not a way to win FPL. Like, people don't enjoy DefCons. And in that is where I really enjoy it, because that's 2-3 points a game for a lot of my defenders right now. And when I wildcard, I'm going to stack up even higher on DefCon defenders, because if they can get even a 50% hit rate across the season, which looks completely doable for a lot of the players I just mentioned, that's 38 extra points. That is the difference between a almost non-asset at maybe 100-point season or someone who's climbing very close to what Gvardiol got as the top scoring defender last year. And that's not to mention all of the defenders in between who would have previously got 120, 130, 140 points. We could be looking at 4.5 to 5 million defenders who are getting 160, 170 points. That is insanely good value for money. And it's a very boring way of accumulating points, but it's points and it will come in over time. And I think people are starting to clock onto it. But as I just mentioned, the ownership percentages are still low enough that you get a massive gain over the majority of the crowd who honestly just hate it and want to see their defenders scoring goals. And fair enough, you'll get a few, but DefCons are more reliable. And if you can get a 50% hit rate out of some of these people, that is way more than any attacking returns than 99% of the defenders are going to get.
I agree. Martin in the chat just said this. I like DefCons. I like getting my nectar price on a pack of frozen blueberries. And for me, it's like using cash back to dictate what my lunch choice is on Monzo. It's exactly that. It's not, it's not game breaking, but it's an extra little bit of added excitement for our Sanoraks that I really enjoy about it. I completely agree with you. It's definitely a little sort of gift to those like us. And yeah, I mean, you're stacking up in terms of stacking up DefCon, Sam. You're going to love my wildcard draft, and I'll show you it in a couple of weeks with Casado in it.
He's in my current one as well, so we're going to have a good time.
That guy just needs to be in your draft. Just put him in. Screw Chelsea defense.
He's going to get 170 points.
I mean, come on. I mean, just so many people are going to be like, oh, you know what, blah blah blah. But I mean, just it makes so much sense. Just put him in, because at that price, he's not going to maintain much interest. He's one of those 8.5%, but I mean, he's going to get DefCons. It's going to be a surprise if he doesn't get DefCons, isn't it? I know he did against West Ham, I think it was in game
3 out of 4 so far. So if he got that across the season, that's like 56 extra points, and he gets a goal every 10 game weeks on average. So that's another 20 points across the season. You are looking at a player that's going to get 160, 170 points if he even gets 4 goals this year.
Yeah, what defender are you going to get alongside João Pedro and Palmer? I'm not going to bother with the defender. I'm just going to get Casado in. Just every game, whatever, 5.5, off you go, mate. Thank you for the 4 points this week. And if you do get
basically
a goal,
playing 6 at the back with him.
Cheers, mate. Oh man, if Nick was still here, he'd be that Randy Marsh ectoplasm meme. But yeah, I mean, I suppose the only kind of wrinkle with this, but I think it's just an interesting one to close on, it's the balance between kind of how clean sheets, attacking returns, and DefCons all sort of comes together in terms of, there's a bit of a sliding scale in terms of price. So at 4.5, you can't, you do favour DefCons. So think about Truffer or Tete, say, versus Senesi or Anderson. You're going to go for the DefCons. But
Yeah.
I don't know, as you start going upwards, is it as cut and dried? I don't know, because there's no Trent character, and you haven't got like a Frimpong and Kukurea, both kind of interesting potentially going forward, and obviously Calafiori and Timber have garnered a lot of attention. But Virgil doing very well on DefCons. Gabriel finally got there this week, and obviously has that attacking threat about him, the unit of set pieces that he is. I think the more expensive ones are when it starts to get a little bit more interesting. And a player like Porro, for example, who's now lost corners, it looks like, because Xavi Simons, who we'll speak about later on. Suddenly, because a player like that, who is playing potentially a more attacking role, losing a few set pieces, and not really, I'm aware that he obviously did get DefCons, much to our delight, against City. I think it was, wasn't it? Was it City? Or was it Bournemouth? I can't remember which one it was. But I think that's when it starts to get really interesting in terms of what you value about these players, a bit more at the more expensive end, and which one's going to win out, be it clean sheet focus or attacking focus or DefCons, or if there's a player like Tarkowski, if it all comes together. That's what I think is really fascinating about that, and how we prioritize DefCons in the mix.
The way I'm thinking about it at the moment is that DefCons are quite easy to predict over a season. So I could quite reliably tell you right now that Tarkowski, if he stays fit for 38 game weeks, he's going to get at least 38 DefCon points this year. But with someone like a Munoz or a Porro, probably a better example, especially now he's lost corners or set pieces, I couldn't tell you exactly how many attacking returns he's going to get. It might be 5, it might be 10, but there's a wide margin of error there, depending on how Spurs look to set up in attack and how they use him this season, how important he is. It can change quite quickly. Whereas with DefCons, for a centre-back who is that nailed into the side and has a very specific job, like we said it in the preseason pod, DefCons for defenders, for centre-backs, are mainly clearances, I believe. There's the odd exception, but it does tend to be the majority clearances. So find a defender that's their clear job is to clear the ball as often as possible, and you'll probably get reliable DefCons. And over a season, you can kind of take that to the bank that in roughly 50% of the games, someone like a Tarkowski, a Lacroix, Anderson, they're going to hit about 38, maybe 40 DefCon points. With Porro, he might get more than that in attacking returns and the odd DefCon as well. But a bit like what I said with Anderson at the start of the season as the Nottingham Forest 5.5, I don't expect him necessarily, or I don't expect Tarkowski to be the highest scoring 5.5 defender, but I know the range in which he'll get. Whereas with a lot of the attacking defenders at that price point, and the 6 millions as well, by the way, because a lot of it depends on how many clean sheets they get and how many attacking returns they get, there's a wider margin of error. And I think in a lot of situations, you'll find yourself picking a player that ends up quite significantly below the more steady Eddie 5.5s, or at 5 million as well. You've got a similar case study with Lacroix, for instance, as well. So there is more upside to be gained from going for an attacking defender, but picking the correct one is going to be the key thing. And as we saw with Porro, you can lose set pieces pretty quickly, and all of a sudden you're still probably not a bad pick. And I've got him in my team right now, and I'm not going to look at bidding him off straight away, but he has taken a bit of a dive now, and he is someone that I probably wouldn't be even considering on a wild card, considering he's lost those set pieces.
No, he's turned into Romero for me on wild card at the moment, for example.
I think
exactly. I think you made a good point there about the boom and bust versus just kind of the steady drip feed. And this drip feed thing is something that you've heard loads and loads of about FPL in the past, especially when it came to like, a Kevin De Bruyne or something who just got an assist every game. Well, actually, no, they didn't. They got an assist every kind of other game, or every kind of 2 or 3 games. With DefCons, there's a good chance that you're going to get DefCons with a lot of these players pretty much every other game. In some cases, every game. And that in of itself is what's shifted the meta the most for me. So screw Salah and Haaland, screw the teams messing around. They always do. But I think DefCons has been the biggest meta shifter.
I completely agree.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to form versus fixture this week. 3 in each for form and fixture, but we will obviously throw in a few other bits and pieces here. We can't not talk about Semenyo, unfortunately. He's been in this so many times. But Semenyo, Sam, now we've added penalties, potentially, depending on Kluivert's availability. The first player to rise by 0.5. How long, Sam, can we go without if you don't own?
I'm hoping we can go one more game week, but I'm not confident on that. I would love to have him. I'm a little bit regretful because he wasn't a million miles away from my game week 1 side, but I went away from him in the end. And I do regret that. He's looked absolutely sensational. And now he's got the potential of penalties if Kluivert's not on the pitch. It just makes him all the better a pick. And he's getting 90 minutes. He's very central to everything Bournemouth do, and he gets shots away at an alarming rate for someone who started this year at 7 million. And they've got good fixtures as well. Like, it's not, obviously Newcastle is the difficult one, and that's why I'm hoping it can wait a week for me, because I can't afford him in one move unless I'm selling someone like a Bruno, which I'm not doing. So I think I can currently afford a double swap to get to him and Haaland next week without a hit when he's got Leeds away from home, who also, by the way, haven't looked bad defensively either, to be fair. But I am pretty frightened that Newcastle, after playing midweek Champions League against Barcelona, might be a little bit on the leggy side, and Bournemouth might be able to capitalise on that as well. So in no game week would I expect Bournemouth to get 0 goals. I think that is the key here, that there are several Premier League sides around mid-table and below that they come up against Newcastle at home, and I'll be like, yeah, I can probably just hope for a clean sheet for Newcastle. That'll probably be okay. They're a good defense. Bournemouth, I'm never hopeful that the team that they're playing are going to keep a clean sheet, because they're a really good attack and they've got options, and Semenyo is the best of those options right now. So yeah, I mean, I think he's the perfect storm. I would love to have him this week. And if I was on a wild card, he'd be in. If I'm making a transfer next week, he'd be in. But this week against Newcastle, I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that the defense is good enough to cancel out his attacking threat for 1 week.
Yeah, I've got to. We'll talk about it later, but I'm one of these people who's got 4 Chelsea, and I'm probably not going to be able to get there until game week 7 when I'm looking to wildcard now. So I'm going to have to do 2 weeks with 2 more weeks without him, by which point he's going to be 8.0 probably. But who knows? Yeah, he's basically this year's Bumo, this year's, I don't know who that player's been in the past, Odegaard or Rashford, something like that, who's been quite cheap. Or cheapish, but you can just kind of stick with. No AFCON, as we've noted. Same as you, wish I got him in game week 1, and now it's the case, as I said, I'm going to have to wait until game week 7. Interesting case, Sam, where analytics models were telling me to ignore it in every solve, but I feel like the added bonus of penalties might mean he's given the extra boost going forward, maybe. But yeah, Newcastle, Leeds, and Fulham next 3. Yeah, I'm just one of those that you just love and leave, basically. Be very, very happy to have him in. Don't really care that he's kind of going to be overperforming. He takes those shots, and it looks like he's kind of leveled up a little bit, evolved into the next level of Semenyo, whatever that's going to be. But yeah, 2 more weeks of no Menyo for me before I kind of make that work. And Bournemouth generally, you mentioned Senasai earlier on as the DefCon hog. I mean, any of these players play a role, I suppose, if you're looking to kind of make a change somewhere or other. Next one, João Pedro, again. Now we've added bullshit bonus points for an assist he knew next to nothing about. Maresco said he'd asked not to play. But it's really key, isn't it, that the underlying numbers, unlike someone like Chris Wood, yes, 4 game weeks in, corresponds to the output. He's 3rd at the moment for non-penalty showing. Semenyo Bello is 5th, 2.3. João Pedro on 2.7. And Man United, Brighton, and well, that'd be a tasty one. Brighton at home and Liverpool at home for the next 3 for him. His Cole Palmer is back, and Chelsea fixtures, as we said at the start of the season, are overall fairly rosy, really. To be honest, they are the hard fixtures, so that kind of just does make the FDR look a little bit different. But at the same time, I'm just not concerned about him at all. And delapsed longish term injury, goo, and all this sort of thing. I mean, it just feels like he's going to have to play, which can only be a good thing. So that assist and 2 bonus were hilarious for owners, not so much for you and I as non-owners this week. But he's just at that critical mass at the moment, Sam. Whereas, as with you last week, so week before last, sorry. So, people should think about it. Maybe people should think, you know what? It's just something I'm going to have to jump on, I'm afraid. So it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but maybe it's something that you should consider if you've gone without, because I don't know. I don't never want to I never want to encourage people to just go with the herd, because that's just the most desultory bit of chat I could ever give. But at the same time, as we found to our chagrin with Lights of Wood in the past, it can also kind of be something that defines your season without you really knowing about it.
Honestly, I think at this point, forget about the ownership. Don't even look at the number. It's high, but it's irrelevant. He's going to get points. Every Chelsea fan I've spoken to loves him, and that's a real key indicator. And he looks like he's going to have to play, like you mentioned. So regardless of the ownership, he's going to get a lot of points up front at 7.7 million. I would just have him in. I think don't look at the ownership and see it as like a sword or a shield, like trying to back against him perhaps and find edges elsewhere. We're too early on in the season. Just pick the players who get the most points and let yourself find an edge later on in the season. There's just, as far as I'm concerned, there's just no need to take a risk against him right now. Obviously, it doesn't have to be an immediate buy if you don't want to. There are obviously other good picks that can keep you warm and fuzzy for the next few weeks, and you're probably okay. And the really good fixtures start from game week 8 to I think game week 12, and then arguably onwards to game week 14 as well, I think, after Liverpool. But not after Liverpool. After, it might be Arsenal, it might be Man City in game week 13. But anyway, by the by, João Pedro is, regardless of ownership, a fantastic pick at that price point. I think now is also a decent jumping on point. Man United, then Brighton. I think that's fine. Game week 7's the tough one, but then 8 through to 12 is great as well. So forget the ownership. He's just a great pick.
Yeah, agreed. Boring, but we've got to mention it. And finally, Jurrien Timber, the highest scoring Arsenal defender, overtaking Calafiori, but is now the time to buy in. Lots of buys in for Jurrien Timber. It is going down, but I'm not gathering timber myself, Sam. Given the fixtures, I'm not looking at them until the 10 and 7. And I think that, as mentioned last week, this is probably the classic case of people doing sort by total points and buy. But yeah, I'm not interested. I think once Champions League starts as well, it's got to be Raya or Gabriel if you're a Johnny-come-lately, maybe even both.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're a fantastic defence. So if you're on a wild card, I'd probably have one stored and just save yourself a transfer down the line. But I wouldn't be out and out buying with a free transfer this week. Man City, then Newcastle. If there are ever teams that are going to score against that defence, it will be those two. So probably one that can wait until game week 7. I do think it is quite interesting that even though it is Man City at home this week, they've got about a 30% chance of a clean sheet, I think, with the most recent bookmakers and live odds and things like that. So that they're not ruling out a clean sheet against Man City. They're that good a defence. But no, I mean, it's not a good enough fixture that you'd look at, or a good enough chance of a clean sheet that you would buy for me anyway. And we're talking about Timber specifically. I just wouldn't be fully confident that he's nailed down for minutes completely over the next run now that Champions League's kicked in as well. I think a bit like what we saw with Cucurella, who until now we thought was absolutely nailed with Chelsea. I think we might see the odd bit of rotation for Arsenal fullbacks because they've got good options. They've got Lewis Skelly, they've got Ben White, they've got options that can come in and are Premier League proven players that will steal minutes off of these people. And Timber's not going to play 90 minutes all the way through the season until game week 38. There are going to be rests, and now they've got more midweek fixtures to deal with. I wouldn't be surprised to see that coming at some random point in the next few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, you could do much worse than maybe going elsewhere, one of the Bournemouth guys this week, and then keeping your powder dry for when you wildcard particularly, or maybe having a plan for that game week 7 turn in the fixtures. Yeah, 132,000 transfers in for Zubimendi this week as well, Sam. let's leave that one. In terms of fixtures, Xavi Simons, I've got to just mention him quickly. So obviously not worth talking about the points and underlying data because he's only that was his debut pretty much. But Brighton away, Wolves at home, and Leeds away next 3. Barely put a foot wrong, I thought, in his debut, and Spurs fans I know were really infused. Loved him from Bundesliga, one of those sort of mercurial characters, as Nick used to say. Has some set pieces and that creative responsibility for Spurs. He's starting on the wing at the moment, but I don't know. I feel like he's going to end up eventually inheriting that Maddison role. And good fixtures in the immediate term price, which is good. It's really flexible. You can go up to Gakpo or down to an Ndiaye or something easily enough. And I wouldn't be too upset at all, Sam, if someone decided to go there. He looked very tight on his debut, as I mentioned, and should be all right for assists. And he loves the long range strike. So last year at Red Bull Leipzig, 5 XG, 10 goals. And a couple of years ago, final season at PSV, when he was on loan for PSG, again, overperformance of 4. And we saw it against England as well, that he's good at the spectacular. So a baseline of good assist potential and the random plus of sexy goals sprinkled on top. Just one of those players that kind of is that kind of toxic mixture, as I said a couple of weeks ago, of being a very good player and also one, a bit like Eze, who you actually don't mind having in your FPL team as well. In fact, we really like having your FPL team because you want to watch him and it's lovely to own them too.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the debut. Excellent set piece delivery, and Spurs have clearly been working on that over the summer on the training ground. Kudus from one side, Xavi Simons on the other. I think their centre backs are going to get plenty of headed goals this year, and if he's the one taking half of those set pieces, he should get plenty of assists from it as well. So yeah, really like him. I think he's at a thoroughly affordable price at 7 million. Yeah, what's not to like? Fixtures are good. If I was wildcarding this week or next, he would be in my consideration set in that sort of mid-price midfielder bracket. And Spurs are a good attack as well. So yeah, I don't know much about his injury record. I don't know whether you can enlighten me on that. He might have a good one, might be bad. I'll probably, if I was to look at buying him, I'd probably check that out and just make sure that he's got that durability. Because they're playing in the Champions League as well, he'll be important for that too, you'd think. So I just want to make sure that his minutes are secure longer term. But everything I've seen so far is very, very exciting, and I do like him a lot.
Last year he was out for a fair bit. I think he did his leg or his ankle or something, but that was it. That's the first time he's ever done anything. I think he's just kind of I'm sure he was in the Barca academy for a long time. And then when I ended up kind of being poached, I think it was by PSG, and just kind of bounced around for a bit. And Leipzig was the first time he was properly just given the responsibility to start and do stuff. You know what PSG was like, and then. Yeah, I'm just really glad he went to Spurs and not Chelsea, to be honest, just because he's able to actually start loads of games and develop. I mean, it's worth mentioning how young he actually is. He's only 22. So there's a high ceiling there. It's worth mentioning. Also worth mentioning as well that last week, top of the list was Jack Grealish, who was brought in by literally over 1 million managers. This week, he's not even on the first page. He's not even on the second page of top transfers in, which is 40 top. He's not in the top 40 basically, a bit on top of the pops, which is just wild. Really, just shows how things can really, from week to week in the early season, turn on a dime. To be honest, that just kind of was prompted because Jonathan in the chat asked me if Everton would be able to perform versus Liverpool and City. And I was just like, well, defensively, yeah, as you spoke about Tarkowski, but offensively, it's one of those which is still a work in progress. I think it's fair to say. But yeah, a player like Grealish, Sam, is one of those that would have been fine in our free hit. But it wasn't fair to say. I mean, you were kind of quite keen on Ndiaye if you were looking to go that way. But it's fair to say, despite them being 6th, 7th in terms of XG, it's one of those players who maybe you just think, you know what, that's just an early season sort of banger. That one I'm happy to just let go.
Interesting. I actually am a little bit more encouraged by him this week than I was last. I wouldn't be buying him now because of the fixtures. I mean, Liverpool next, Man City where he can't play in the next 4 as well. So I don't think now's the time to be buying him. But I would be very interested in keeping an eye on Everton because they look like a much better attacking unit than they have done before. And Grealish looks very central to everything good they're doing. I think that, again, like I said last week, makes other players better FPL picks than him, perhaps, because I think he will be the creator generally. He'll get the odd goal, but I think he'll generally be the creator. Whereas Ndai, whoever's playing up front, whether that be Beto or Barry, or, of course, Dewsbury Hall, arriving late in the box, all of those options I think will be bolstered or boosted by Grealish being there. And I think they're a good attack. And I know you've got doubts about them offensively against teams like Liverpool City. I would not be surprised whatsoever if they score in both of those games. I think, especially on the break now, they'll absorb pressure. Liverpool look very get-atable on the break, let's say.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, very, and even more so than ever before under Klopp as well. I think we're probably back to that sort of era with both of the fullbacks bombing on. They are leaving spaces, and Man City are always good to concede a goal. They leave plenty of spaces in behind. They control possession, they get men forward, and if they overcommit at any point, Everton now do have the attackers to catch them. So I probably wouldn't be like massively keen on like doubling or tripling up on them or anything right now. But if I've got an Everton player against either of them, I'm not going to be scared of playing them, which might be copium when we get to my team later on. But I just think they're a thoroughly decent attack now. They're not the Everton that we saw under Dyche. I think they're better than that now, and they've got better players in their front line that can score goals against the best teams.
Definitely. They posted 2 XG, it's worth noting, against Villa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are right. I think in terms of Grealish himself, that was kind of where I was looking. Really, that was the point I was making, really, in terms of the rush to get him in last week, and then how that's the people not really looking at that at all this week. That's the only thing I was going to say. Maybe akin to the curse of the player being brought in. Running a bit on, so I think we can leave the Forest defence. I put Sells of the Forest defence up here. We've already said all we need to say about them in terms of stick or twist. 2 games and then get rid and not look back, really, after that. And Watkins, we mentioned that we were going to just have a word on him. He seems ever present in the form column, doesn't he, on this map? Another blank, just 0.1 XG added to his numbers from last week. But 3 good fixtures, Sam, remain on the roster. Burnley, Fulham, and Sunderland, Fulham, and Burnley. Patience is wearing very thin, though, and I can understand when people are getting rids, dropped by 0.2 already. The most sold forward this year already, unsurprisingly. And I don't know. I said a few times that, hey, he's a player that I'm always going to be worried about selling. That will be the week that he'll go on and do something. But as the weeks roll by the time we get to game week 7, I'd have given him all of these like lovely looking fixtures at the start of the year, and maybe we get to the Fulham game, the Burnley games are in game week 7, and maybe I'll just be selling him, because I will be selling him almost definitely on that wild card, and just think, hey, you know what? If he scores now, so be it. But he hasn't done anything for me for the last 7 weeks, so whatever.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think, considering the other issues in my side, it's worth a transfer. And even if I had no issues in my side, the transfers, I think, can be used for higher upside elsewhere in future game weeks. So I'd probably still just hold on to him for a week or two. But if I had unlimited transfers and I could just be offered a chance to get rid of him without any consequence in terms of the amount of transfers that I have next week, he'd be gone. I wouldn't have him in, even though next 3 are looking good on paper. Sunderland, I've actually been pretty impressed with defensively. Fulham are always a good defense. And then Burnley, fine, it's a good fixture, but 1 in the next 3 is like objectively good. And again, Aston Villa just aren't scoring goals. So I don't think at 8.8 million, it's worth holding on to him if you're on a wild card. I think for me, the only reason he stays is because I've got bigger issues with my side and more impactful, higher upside transfers in the next couple of game weeks that I really want to make work to get to captaincy options. But yeah, I mean, if you've got no issues, I completely understand selling him regardless of the fixtures. Just for me, because of the fixtures and because there are other issues, I am just holding on to him for now, begrudgingly, and my patience is very, very thin on him. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to owning him for the next 2 weeks, but I think he's just going to have to stay regardless.
Differential by mistake. But yeah, I mean, so 1.5 XGI, so 28th or something like that. Morgan
Yeah.
Rogers, Sam, 100 equal 110th overall. Similar XGI to same XGI, I should say, to Gabriel Goodmanson. That does not include the own goal. Which probably would make him a lot higher. But yeah, copy pasta, and that to if you're a Rogers owner and don't have other better things to do. But you know, Semenyo is right there, as well as Xavi Simons, of course.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move on to the 1 week punt update. 2 blanks for us this week with a couple of ex-lively picks that were on the roster. So Gakpo for me, 3 points. Didn't quite cut the mustard. A few occasions where he tries to do his fellow countryman Ian Robin special, except he was a little bit further outside the box and didn't quite pay off for him. This week's pick for me, Lacroix. You brought my attention to the idea that he started very well, didn't he, in terms of XG last year, and only got 1 goal. West Ham, absolutely terrible at defending with set pieces. Graham Potter bright-siding it, saying, we defended the first 9 and 10 very well. But after that, it all went to pot. But Lacroix, goal threat, DefCon monster. Let's do it against West Ham, I think, is my view. Funnily enough, someone actually mentioned your pick earlier on in the chat. And I can't remember who it was. It might have been Martin Hedden. So, yeah, take it away, Sam.
I mean, I was looking around earlier. I would have picked Lacroix as well. I really do have to go first in one of these weeks with this. But yeah, I thought again, just to be interesting, and this is just a bit of fun, I'm going to go completely off the wall. Agbadou's been good on the defensive contributions. Wolves have been terrible defensively, but if they're ever going to keep a clean sheet, it will be against Leeds, who aren't really finding any ways to score goals at the moment. So a bit like Lacroix for similar sort of logic reasons, good odds of a clean sheet, maybe some DefCons in there, might get lucky from a set piece, but I would prefer Lacroix out of the two, but I just didn't want to do the same pick as you, to be completely honest. And looking around, there are so many like closely contested fixtures this week that there aren't any like real standout targetable fixtures that I want to be picking a 1 week punt from. I think Liverpool would be most natural, but I'm going to want them more in other weeks. So I don't want to waste a Liverpool spot at home to Everton. So yeah, I'm just going to go on for a Wolves player and hope it pays off, but I'm not expecting much.
Wolves have got like similar to last year, I kind of feel, although their run was even more elongated, but they've got another really good run of fixtures, like all the way to like November, something like that. But
yeah,
I mean,
why I bought Strand Larson.
Yeah,
it's going well.
That's what I was looking at Strand Larson as well. But I mean, it's one of those teams that, judging by how it started, you can't really back at the moment. Maybe one that you'd look at in wildcard if they do recover this week, and then hey, you know what? Give it another week. You've got a couple of weeks of information. Could be worth looking at after that. They play the 2 newly promoted sides, 8 and 9. They've got another one, Leeds, this week. So one to keep under consideration, I guess. But at the moment, obviously, you can't really be going there. Best captain this week. I don't know. It feels a little bit academic, but obviously we'll speak for people who don't own Salah. But are we both going to circumvent Gandhi this time, Sam? Possibly. I mean, 0.9 XGI for non-pen XGI for Salah gives him equal 56th, which is obviously quite concerning. Everton's XGC is 14th, so yeah, it's just all right. It's all right in terms of the matchup. Also, we've picked up João Pedro and Semenyo here. So João Pedro or Palmer versus United. João Pedro's non-penalty, as mentioned, was pretty good. And Man United's XGC is pretty bad. And that they are in disarray right now. And Semenyo, obviously, another one of those picks, as we mentioned in the chat as well. But it's worth noting that Newcastle, obviously due to many factors, including a red card in the game week 1, do have the best XGC this year. But as you mentioned, Sam, there are other contextual factors which you should look at beyond just the base data. So for us Salah owners, Sam, first off, it's just the case. For me, at least, I'm not going to beat around the bush and say this is an option. This is an option. For me, I think that it's just an academic. Yes, shove it on Salah. If it goes well, it goes well. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I think it's probably just the most logical option this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very likely to be selling him next week. So chuck the armband on him for the final really good fixture in the run, I'd say. I mean, Everton's not as nice as Burnley, but I mean, he found a way to return against Burnley, and there's something to be said for that. Yeah, for me, I'm keeping it on Salah. I'm not overthinking it. I think if João Pedro had penalties, then I'd be a bit more tempted to maybe look at him. Or if Watkins was in any form whatsoever, then him against Sunderland might be an option. But no, given that those two things aren't things, then I'm gonna just go with Salah, keep it simple. And the amount of times that I've tried to overcomplicate things with captaincy in the past and it's just bitten me, just reminds me that okay, we've got years and years on Salah. We know what he's like. He's been poor so far and still got 3 returns in 4 games. That's where I'm putting the armband.
I agree. I think it just goes to show, doesn't it, that this, given what we spoke about earlier on, that the top 2 teams in terms of most tickers this week are Villa and Nottingham Forest in terms of the best fixture, right, away against new promoted sides, and then Wolves are third. But no one's likely to have any assets from them. And then Crystal Palace against West Ham were kind of make up the top 4 for most tickers this week. I mean, if you do own if you do own Mateta, I think that's a really good captaincy shout this week.
Potentially,
Especially if you're not no Salah owner, would you ever look at captaining a defender like a Lacroix or a Munoz or something like that? Maybe if you're really scrabbling around, but I don't know. Yeah. If you're a non-Salah owner though, Sam, I suppose that's the question. I mean, I suppose you might just back Semenyo, given the if you don't own him, of course, given the fact that you stated earlier on.
Yeah, I am pretty bullish on the Newcastle defense, though. I really like what I've seen from them so far defensively. So I'd be maybe scared off of Semenyo. Also, with the opportunity that Kluivert comes back in and does take penalties back off of him, I think he's a great pick. I just don't know whether I'd go as far as captaincy against Newcastle personally. I prefer Mateta, who was unlucky not to return in game week 4. And I think I'd probably actually prefer João Pedro or Palmer if he starts as well. So yeah, I mean, Salah out and out favourite for me. Haaland is never a terrible option because it's Haaland, but Arsenal are a very good defence, so probably wouldn't be my out and out pick. I don't think I'm on board with Semenyo as captain personally. I just think Newcastle's defence is good enough that I would look elsewhere.
Yeah, fine. So where are you left with? Maybe João Pedro against the flailing United?
Yeah, I think so. I think if Salah was injured tomorrow, all of a sudden, and I had to pick someone else, it would probably be João Pedro.
Yeah, fair. All right. Okay. So on to our teams for the week ahead.
Yes.
So yeah, Saturday night, I was really on tilt. I was pissed off. I had a wild card ready to confirm. I didn't do it. Yes.
You didn't.
Palmer coming back was probably a saviour, actually. Come back and made me think, actually, it's not as bad as it looks, because it added the player in. I've got 4 Chelsea. So before anyone looks at this and thinks, oh, yeah, just sell Cunha, that's really obvious. Count the Chelsea. Yes, I've got Mark Gu. And maybe as well, maybe Miss Murillo. So I'm looking at Esteve and Dewsbury will come off the bench. But I can't sell Cunha because I've got 4 Chelsea. And you know what? As mentioned earlier on, I think actually the best option is to go ahead and roll the transfer, buy Haaland next week for his generational blank against Burnley. So last year, I triple captain against Southampton, the single highest XG for an individual for him. And you've only got 1 goal. I think I can see it happening again, Sam. But it just feels like the right thing to do. So I'll be probably rolling this week. In fact, almost definitely rolling this week. And then no matter what comes, if I've got Mark Gu off the bench, I'll pay with 10, whatever. Get the triple captain off in 6 and then wild card immediately in 7. But yeah, this week I'm going to just forget about it, see what happens and roll, unless there's some sort of actual sort of intense catastrophe. It's not too bad. I mean, Sells in goal, Anderson absolutely fine, DefCon monster, Porro, Tozin against United, Murillo. I'm sure that Ange hang on a minute. I've seen this movie before where Ange as a player is going to come back soon and he doesn't. Uh-oh. But hey, hopefully Murillo does play that. If not, Esteve comes off the bench. In midfield, I'm going to start Cunha just for the lols. But if not, usually Hall comes in or Esteve comes in for him. Reinders, fine, whatever. Palmer, good. Glad he's back. Salah, the captaincy up front. João Pedro and that Watkins fellow who used to be the future. But yeah, I'll go with it. It probably looks like an all right team. And next week, my team actually looks like a free hit team, incredibly, because loads of those players are at home and they all look quite good. So yeah, it is what it is. It's one of those weeks where I think it's actually quite good to just be like, well, actually, I'm going to do nothing, because actually the opportunity cost of doing something versus the payoff of doing nothing in future is actually much better. So despite the fact I've got 4 Chelsea and all the solvers are now very confused and don't know what the hell to advise me, I think being a human, I'm going to be like, I'm just going to do nothing. And then next week I'll wiggle this out, because I can do Gu to Haaland via Salah to like an Ndai or something like that. I can't quite get Semenyo. I could sell Watkins and sell Palmer, but I'm probably gonna go that way.
Maybe I'll sell Palmer.
Yeah, I know.
Not against Brighton.
Yeah, why would I do that? So I'll probably get my man Tavernier or something like that, and just or maybe Ndai, to be fair, because I've got Everton, I've got West Ham, haven't they? In 6, so one of those things I might go with. But yeah. On to you.
I think that's a roll.
Yeah, I think so. And on to you. So initially you were thinking bench boost, but it looks like events have conspired to mean that bench boost is going to be held in your pocket for a little while longer.
I think so. Yeah. This is a fun with flags episode. I've got 2 red flags, Sarr and Strand Larsen, and Murillo in my back line as well. So I've got the most hope for Murillo, but I'm not massively confident. I'm probably like 50-50 on him. But I think the good thing about Murillo is he's either going to play 90, start, or not come off the bench. So it's, I think, fairly risk-free to just play him. And if he doesn't play, fine, I get my bench. But with Sarr and Strand Larsen, I think Sarr is just not going to be fit. He's out, I would imagine, but I'm going to play him anyway, just on the off chance that Glasner has pulled a bit of a blinder, lied, and got him fit for the West Ham game. I know they're targeting the following week, so what's 1 week between friends, eh? Maybe bring him back early. I'll just cross my fingers on that one, but I'm not expecting him to play. And Strand Larsen is my other one. I think it's a bit harsh having him red flagged, although I like it because I've listened to the press conferences. I've watched everything that Pereira said, and I think there is a chance that he's back for this game week, albeit a 50-50 chance. I think red flagging him means that no one's going to have him, but I don't think it's impossible he plays this one. So I'll wait for the press conferences to see how much hope I actually have on players like Murillo and Strand Larsen. But outside of that, the players that I do have that are fit to start: Sanchez in goal, Anderson against Brentford, in my backline for Fulham, Porro against Brighton. I think they're both absolutely fine this week. Yep. Armband on Salah, Anderson in midfield against Burnley for Forest. That's Forest Anderson. Fernandes at home to Chelsea is just never a terrible pick. And Pedro Watkins up front. I think it's fine. Like, as I've mentioned a couple of times on this pod, this is really a week that I think there's just no massive fixture to be targeting with players that you'd want to be piling in on this week. So it's just a week that I'm hoping to just kind of hold everything down for 1 more week, roll a transfer, and attack in game week 6. Now, on my bench, the players I haven't mentioned, if I do have those 3 players, Murillo, Sarr, and Strand Larsen out, I will be relying on Ndai and Tarkowski away at Liverpool and Esteve at home to Nottingham Forest. Huh? It's not what I would want, but I was willing to bench boost with them just to get it out of the way. So by that logic, I should be happy enough just playing them. I think Ndai on penalties, 90-minute man against Merseyside rivals. And I've already mentioned I fancy Everton to score in that game, so I don't think he's an awful pick, although wouldn't be on a free hit or anything. And Tarkowski will get DefCons against Liverpool. So probably 3 or 4 points from him. Who knows? You might get lucky. He might get a last-minute equaliser like he did last year to get us those sweet Moyes points, if you remember. And if he can do that again, then I will be loving life. So yeah, they'll probably come off my bench. It's not ideal. I'm not expecting a big green arrow or anything this week. I'd be happy with maintaining position. But I think having 2 free transfers to use next week to get to Haaland for the captaincy is more important than any move that I can make to this week's team to upgrade any of those players I've just mentioned coming off the bench. So I think for me, like you, it's opportunity cost and it's rolling.
Yeah, I agree. One of those weeks where, like, we could have themed the pod around the value of rolling, but probably best to just leave that for a later date. But hey, yeah, I 100% agree. Obviously, it depends on your makeup, of course, but yeah, see how it goes. But the real fun will come next week, won't it, Sam? When we both triple captain Erling Haaland for that generational blank, as I described. Okay.
Well, I'm not completely locked in on triple captaining, but I will leave myself open the option open. So yeah, we'll see how I feel when we get to it. But yeah, I mean, it's a good week too. It's definitely a good week too.
Yeah, I feel yeah. All right, I think that's everything for this week.
I think so. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the stream, and especially if you've been watching along live, we really appreciate it with Champions League going on in the background, as with a few cup fixtures as well. We have been Who Got the Assist on Blue Sky. You can find us at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word, or FPL Pricey for me. On X, you can find us at WGTA_FPL. Again, FPL Pricey for me on there. And on YouTube, it's WGTA_FPL, and I'm on there at FPL Pricey. I've got a wildcard video coming out tomorrow morning if anyone is interested in hitting that button. So that'll be out at, I think, 7 or 7:30 tomorrow morning. And I do the Thursday, or I think it's a Saturday deadline this week, isn't it? So Friday night stream as well, if anyone wants to tune into that. But if you did enjoy the pod, then if you could give us a follow on those social channels, give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And of course, leaving a like, hitting subscribe on YouTube does do us a massive world of good. So thank you very much.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Sam. And thanks for listening. We hope we assist you think about the emerging FPL meta in proper WGTA fashion. Be back same time next time. So we'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.